We all know how the United States, through the Manhattan Project, created the world's first nuclear weapons, the bombs that ended World War II and changed history forever. And we also know how the Soviet Union, through a mix of espionage and reverse engineering, built its own bomb just 4 years later in 1949. But here's what most people don't know. The third country to make an atomic bomb wasn't China, France, or anyone else. It was Britain. Before America's Manhattan Project ever began, Britain already had its own secret nuclear research group called Tube Alloys. In the early 1940s, British scientists were among the first to realize that splitting the atom could create a bomb powerful enough to end a war. When the US joined the fight in 1941, the two countries agreed to combine their efforts. Britain handed over all of its research to help speed up the American program. By 1943, the US and UK signed the Quebec Agreement, promising to share all knowledge about atomic weapons. So, naturally, you'd think Britain would have access to everything that came out of the Manhattan Project, right? Well, fun fact, no. After the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, America had a brand new superweapon, and wanted to keep it that way. The United States had just entered a new age, one where whoever controlled the atom would control the world. And while Britain had helped make it possible, the Americans weren't interested in sharing that power. In 1946, Congress passed the McMahon Act, which made it illegal to share nuclear research or materials with any foreign nation, even trusted allies. To Washington, this was about national security. To London, it felt like a knife in the back. During the war, Britain had sacrificed its entire atomic program, handing over tube alloys, years of research, and dozens of top scientists to the Manhattan Project. They had even shared access to uranium from British colonies. But now, after victory, the US had slammed the door shut. No access to data, no technology, not even to British scientists who had worked in Los Alamos. The Americans saw Britain as a declining empire, too weak and too poor to matter. They feared that giving Britain the bomb could lead to independent foreign policy, or worse, that secrets might leak to the Soviets through British intelligence, which already had some very suspicious characters. So, the once special relationship was suddenly not so special. Britain, still rationing food and rebuilding cities reduced to rubble, found itself frozen out of the very project it helped create. The empire was crumbling, colonies were breaking away, and American politicians quietly believed that Britain should stay focused on tea and diplomacy, not thermonuclear physics. But Prime Minister Clement Attlee disagreed. He was quiet, cautious, and often underestimated. But he understood power. He knew that in the coming Cold War, nations without nuclear weapons would have no voice. If Britain wanted to sit at the same table as the US, and the US insisted it couldn't just have an army or a navy, it needed a bomb. And so, behind closed doors, Attlee began to plan one. Attlee wasn't a loud or flashy leader, but he was a realist. He believed that if Britain wanted to stay a global power, and not just America's sidekick, it needed its own nuclear weapons. He also feared that the US might return to isolationism, leaving Europe alone against the Soviet Union. So, in 1947, despite the country being nearly bankrupt, Attlee secretly approved a new weapons program. Its name, High Explosive Research, a deliberately boring title to hide a not-so-boring mission. The program was based in Aldermaston, and many of its scientists had already worked on the Manhattan Project, so they weren't starting from scratch. Even so, it was a massive challenge. Britain had to design, test, and produce everything on its own without American help. The one advantage? Britain controlled much of the world's uranium supply thanks to its colonies and ties with Canada and Africa. That gave it leverage and made sure Washington didn't push too hard to stop them. Still, progress was slowed by spy scandals. Several British scientists were caught passing nuclear secrets to the Soviets, making the US even more distrustful. Britain had hoped to be the second nuclear power, but in 1949 the Soviet Union detonated its first bomb, a huge shock to the West and a major embarrassment to London. Now it was a matter of national pride. The British government poured everything into the project, racing to catch up and prove it could still stand among the world's great powers. There was just one problem: where to test the bomb. Britain itself was too small and too densely populated, so they turned to the Commonwealth, choosing remote islands off the coast of Australia. Why Australia? Well, partly because it was part of the British Empire, and colonies don't get much of a say, and partly because Britain promised to help develop Australian nuclear energy in return. In October 1952, Britain conducted its first successful nuclear test, codenamed Operation Hurricane, off the Montebello Islands. The explosion was powerful, roughly 25 kilotons, similar to the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. Britain had done it. It was now the third nuclear power on Earth. By 1955, Britain had around 15 operational atomic bombs, giving it a real nuclear deterrent. And by 1958, after proving itself capable, the US finally reopened nuclear cooperation with Britain through the US-UK Mutual Defense Agreement, sharing advanced technology once again. Britain's determination had paid off, but at a steep cost. The nuclear program drained its already weak economy and exposed thousands to radiation risks during testing. Still, it gave Britain what it wanted most: respect and influence in a world now defined by nuclear power. What do you think? Was Britain right to spend so much on building its own nuclear bomb, or was it just chasing lost glory? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and while you are there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and thumbs up. It really helps us keep going, and I really appreciate all of you for tuning in. I will see you in the next video.